For those who are just joining us, welcome aboard. We are going to talk today about Incredibuild and accelerating your game development with Incredibuild. If this is your first time joining us, it's going to be a great overview of the platform and everything it offers. As we head into GDC, Beau and I thought we'd go back to the basics. What is Incredibuild? How can it help you make great games faster today? So my name is Duncan Huffman, as it says on the slide there. I'm the head of product marketing here at Incredibuild. And with me today is Beau Peck, who helps customers like you get the most out of Incredibuild every single day. So let's get started. At its most essential, Incredibuild is about time. Build time, release time, developer time. We accelerate build time so your teams can focus on what matters. We all know that great software takes time to create. Incredibuild started about 20 years ago by developers who were looking to reduce the wait times of builds. As software gets more sophisticated and projects and teams get larger, these problems don't get smaller. I don't have to tell you that slow build times and waiting around for builds absolutely impacts what you're doing every day. But so does the difficult process management that comes with distributed teams and not being able to understand what part of the pipelines are broken. And then the inefficient resources, hardware that's out of control or cloud costs that are out of control, or not knowing what to buy and when, and what you're going to need at crunch time. So what the heck is Incredibuild, though? In short, we're a software platform that speeds up your builds. First, we literally speed them up on-prem and in the cloud, often as much as 10 times or more. Next, we make it so much easier to monitor and troubleshoot your builds in real time and historically, all across your organization. And then lastly, we give you real control and scalability for the resources your builds use, hardware and cloud resources, making sure nothing is over-provisioned or under-provisioned, saving you not just time, but money and investments in hardware. So we'll go into exactly how we do all this in the next sections. But first, I want to make sure we understand that we don't stop with just devs. We help across the organization. So platform engineers, testing, department heads, all the way to CXO suites. Incredibuild helps impact productivity, product quality, and time to market. Also dev satisfaction and costs. We make long builds shorter, obviously 2 to 10x typically. We improve product quality by making sure you have more testing and more iterations. We improve costs, like I said, by making sure your resources are efficiently used. And then productivity, we are helping developer health and productivity every day by making sure that you're not waiting around for builds, long builds. The best part, in my opinion, is that we do this without any code changes. No change to your existing processes. You can do it with the team you have today. No new scripting languages, no new patterns, no new practices. It's the same tool chains, the same stack you use today. We're non-disruptive, and we integrate with all the tools you use right now, Jenkins or TeamCity or GitHub, whatever it is you need. We work with that today. We'll talk more about that later. So far, I've made a lot of promises, but let's get real. Let's go into the details of how this works. So our acceleration side of things, we use the hardware that you already have, idle processes, spare servers, even cloud instances. Of course, you can buy more hardware too if you need that. And we distribute and cache those builds across those resources. This gives you unlimited cores, essentially, at build time and speeds up your builds by often as much as 10x or more. It's distribution plus caching. So you don't have to pick just one strategy. Again, on the cloud or on-prem or a hybrid. Beau's been helping orgs like yours do this for years. He's going to explain those 3 core elements: build distribution, build caching, and burst to cloud, and how they work together, and why you don't actually have to choose between them, but can use them all together. I'll turn it over to Beau here.
Perfect. Thanks, Duncan. So yeah, let's dive in a little bit into how Incredibuild is going to actually give you back that time. And as he talked about, there's several different ones, but the first one that we're going to discuss, that first method, is accelerating the build being done by distribution. Now, to do this, we create a compute grid of all available processing power across the resources that you will designate, whether they be physical servers, laptops, VMs, or even containers. And again, whether they're on-prem or in the cloud, or even if you need to operate in a hybrid method and connect both of them. What we'll do is create that grid, and then we split up the individual compilation tasks and parallelize them across these network resources. Now, the grid is comprised of three components. And the first is an initiator. In our parlance, that's the machine that's actually starting and doing the build. So example would be, say, your laptop or a CI build server. The second thing that you see here in the diagram is a coordinator. Now, you can think of a coordinator as air traffic control, right? It essentially manages the grid, and it knows where everything is, where it lives, what the configurations they are, and then what's available or busy to be able to be consumed by your build. And the final element is the helpers. Now, these are the actual machines that have these additional compute resources that you want to make available for use. Now, distribution itself, the flow is very straightforward. Following through the diagram here, you can kind of see in a counterclockwise motion. As you finish coding and you kick off your build, that initiator is going to go out and communicate to the coordinator. It's going to request any available helpers to be able to distribute that processing to. And once received, that initiator is then going to farm out all those individual tasks to the helpers, which are going to actually do the compilation. And when they're done, they return that compiled object back to that initiator. Now, one thing to call out here too is that all linking is going to occur on that build machine, on that initiator, because that's a high IO intensive process that we're not going to try to network. Now, oftentimes there's a question that pops up when we're talking with customers. They say, well, this sounds really great. I can distribute to a grid, but what happens if a helper machine goes down while it's doing this processing? Things such as the laptop is suddenly closed, or a power supply dies, or something along those lines. The key thing for all developers to understand is that Incredibuild is going to handle that automatically for you. Your build is not going to fail. What ends up happening is the initiator will recognize that that process task didn't complete, that there was a failure in it, and it's just going to auto relocate that to another available helper. It does not stop or fail the build.
So just clear, Beau, these helpers are not ours. They're not. You're not going to our servers or anything like that. These are laptops, developer machines, build servers, your build farm, whatever it is you want to set up as helpers, right?
Correct. Everything that you do inside your environment is owned by you. But this isn't a software as a service that you're buying off and having to ship code or ship things across lines and be concerned about additional network or security issues. Everything is going to be self-contained in your environment. So it just follows your normal IT processes and all the same tools that you use today. Nothing is going to change.
Yeah, you're in policy, you're compliant with what you're doing today, and nothing's going off site, unless, of course, you're sending it to the cloud. And we'll talk about that in a second. Let's talk about caching, though.
You bet. So distribution is pretty powerful in its own right? We're now parallelizing, love to say that word 3 times fast. You're taking that and building and pushing that across all these resources. And, the joke is, hey, now you can do your Kessel run in 12 parsecs, right? That's pretty impressive. But what if you want to be able to accelerate even further? And this goes back to that complementary aspect of what Duncan was just talking about. And that's something that we call build cache. That's where this is going to come into play. It's the next layer of how we're going to be able to save you time with your builds. Now, build cache is a patented technology by us that's going to seamlessly integrate into this grid that we created. Now, it also is controlled centrally by that coordinator, and it's enabled on the initiator. Once you've completed your normal build process, it's going to just continue to follow that distribution method when it needs. But here's the catch with the cache. When you first enable it, it's going to be cold, obviously. So you are going to distribute out your entire build that first time. Now, the difference is at the same time, when those build objects are coming back that we said came back from the helpers, as they're returned, we're going to create and populate that cache with these objects. We're also going to create and maintain a manifest of all these task fingerprints of what these objects are and create a hash for them. Okay, so things such as the command line or the environment variables, say you had a library path that had to be included, any specific tools like your compiler version, and even the input files themselves, whether they're headers or just CPP files, things like that. Now, the next time you follow your path and you say, okay, I've made my code changes and I'm going to go ahead and build again, same workflow is going to follow. Initiator will talk to the coordinator, and it's going to get us allocated helpers. But now the difference is now we know the input and outputs of those build objects. So what we're going to do is now compare those inputs to the manifest. So the initiator is going to check its hash, and if we find a match, that's going to be a hit in the cache, and the object will automatically be pulled, and therefore you don't have to distribute. If there's a miss, then we're going to follow that normal distributed acceleration process we just talked to, send those tasks out to the grid of helpers. Now, another thing that to be aware of is that cache management is also handled automatically, meaning you don't have to remember to clean it or update it. So what this does is allow you to change the narrative to cache what you can and distribute what you can't. So this specifically not only accelerates your builds more, but now what we're doing is saving you compute power, we're saving you network bandwidth, and the additional costs of running these machines.
Yeah, and this cache is shared, right? So if distributed teams are working together, you can cache locally, but you also can cache shared so that you can save bandwidth across organizations and across geographies as well.
Correct. And that's the main thing is what we want to do is be able to let you build to what your architecture needs are so the developers can still work locally and take advantage of this. So if they take something and they have a branch, they can build that and they can still utilize the main objects. And then also for folks who have CI build farms where they're pushing these things through, we have shared endpoints so that the CI build farms can take advantage of all of these centralized resources. And then you can even have developers be able to pull from those shared endpoints as well. So we give you a lot of dynamic flexibility to take advantage of the distribution when need be, but then also cache, which just helps accelerate you more quickly. Awesome.
Let's talk about the cloud resources.
Perfect. Yeah. So like we already talked about, the speed of Incredibuild is amazing, right? So you got the distribution, you have the caching, but one thing you have to consider, especially when you're building or in architecture design, is that your acceleration is only good as its ability to be able to be flexible and scalable to adapt to whatever those business needs are, right? So what happens if your grid resources suddenly get tapped, or if you're hit crunch and you're unable to procure additional hardware? Incredibuild Cloud is the third element that's going to be able to allow you to handle that. And in a nugget, what it does is it augments and gives you that flexibility for your existing on-prem or cloud-based grid to automatically orchestrate and deploy and then optimally operate additional cloud helpers that you can burst to. So the process flow, again, we're very consistent in our process flow. You don't have to go change your architecture each time you want to take advantage of one of these capabilities. You have a build, it's going to be kicked off from the initiator again, it's utilizing available helpers, and that's great. Now what happens with the cloud is that coordinator is also going to interact with the Incredibuild cloud orchestration service, right? And that's going to be able to make API calls on your behalf to create and scale the additional cloud helpers that you need to burst to when you suddenly realize you need more resources. Now there's a couple key capabilities that you want to bear in mind here. Is one, all of this is still inside of your architecture, right? It's going to be based on the configurations that you set and maintain for a pool of available helpers, right? So when the build demands additional resources, we will grow that pool automatically to meet your need. Now, specifically, another thing that drives a lot of advantages for you is that we make use of spot instances. Now, we can use on-demand instances as well, but for those who may not be familiar with the spot instances, these are VMs that are offered by the cloud providers at a significant discount, usually 40 to 60% of the cost. The caveat for that is they can be rapidly reclaimed based on contention in that environment that you're operating in. And that goes back to, many people say, well, wait a minute, they can be reclaimed. Well, isn't that a kind of a rough patch for me to have to manage? It goes back to kind of what we said earlier, what happens if a task fails? If that spot resource was reclaimed, we're not going to fail the build. It's just going to recognize that task didn't complete, and we're going to go find an additional helper. Now, Incredibuild will automatically find the next available spot instance to assign that task. We will go out and grab additional ones if we need to. Now, the last thing that we kind of want to call out here too is the orchestration is seamless. So as the jobs complete or fewer tasks are required, we're going to automatically move helpers back to a hibernate status, or we'll destroy them altogether. And all that's going to do is help you maintain your cloud costs. Now, speaking of the cloud costs, one other thing here that you see on this diagram is that we can run Windows or Linux VMs based on your need for the spot instances. However, Windows VMs costs are higher than Linux, right? So regardless of if they're spot or on demand. So one thing that we also have as part of the cloud service is a smart compatibility layer. And what that does is gives you the ability to utilize Linux helpers to compile for what you would normally use Windows for. It's just another way that you help optimize your cloud costs.
And the cool thing about this, I mean, that's cool in and of itself, is you don't need to know anything about Linux. You don't have to manage those separately. It's literally just a flick of the switch in our control panel to help you turn that on.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to know how to go set up all your fleets of Linux boxes or change things if you're not used to operating in a POSIX-based environment. All that's going to be handled again seamlessly and under the covers with just a simple selection in the configuration that again you maintain by what your business needs are and what your builds are going to require.
So we'll get into an example in a second, but I want to hammer that point a little bit. These are Windows workloads building on Linux machines because they're less expensive in the cloud. Linux VMs. Awesome.
Yes.
Cool. Let's go to the next slide. There's an example here that you've got.
Yeah, so this kind of closes out how does it work. What we wanted to do is bring an example of how does this actually apply and what does it mean to you, right? Because we're talking and sending you a whole lot of things that we can do, but this is just an example that utilize the test of the Unreal Engine Lyra starter game. This was compiled using Unreal Engine 5.1 at the time, and it was running on a Windows 10 VM that was powered by Intel Xeon Platinum series processors underneath the covers. So, when we compiled, it's the actual development editor. So just following the way a developer would work, they make code. I want to check if my rocket launcher does we did it correctly. I need to compile everything, make sure it doesn't fire backwards. And I want to see this from the development editor. That's what we built. And we utilized just a 16 core initiator, right? And when we did that, it took 1 hour and 36 minutes and some change. Now, what we did was we brought the power of two aspects right out of the gate with Incredibuild. One, we said, well, with Incredibuild, we can burst to the cloud. So we're going to add 124 more cores. And you see here, it says 132. Well, the reason is we also were able to size down the initiator. We took it to 8 cores. So that's automatically bringing cost savings to you because you're not running as a large a machine and you're taking advantage of the cloud to give you the additional cores you need to. When we did that, it reduced the build time to just shy of 19 minutes, right? 18 minutes and 53 seconds. At the end of the day, that's over an 80% acceleration, right? And to a developer, that just gave you over 1 hour back in your time to be able to say, yes, everything worked. I can ship this onwards to Q&A, or no, I see that my rocket launcher didn't do what I expected. It circled back and hit me. I need to go do a little bit more debugging. But either way, that's just kind of an example of what you can do. And all this was handled automatically under the covers by Incredibuild. We didn't have to do anything else other than go in and tell it to start the build. And that kind of wraps up how we do what we do, and thank you for, listening to that. We're always available for additional questions, but I'll turn this back over to Duncan, who's now going to kind of chat through how we get some insights to your builds as well.
Yeah, because like we said in the beginning, this is about time, right? And build acceleration is just one piece of that. You talked a little bit about resource coordination and scalability and acceleration. The thing we haven't talked a lot about is observability. If anybody has ever had to slog through build logs to troubleshoot what went wrong or where things broke, you know how painful it can be. And rather than having folks on call who shouldn't be, or again, digging through those logs, our build monitor and our build dashboards give you visibility, both real time and historically, across the entire organization so that you can debug faster. You can identify bottlenecks faster. You can take a look at weird anomalies or anything that might be happening with your resources. And you can really get deep insights, like I said, real time and historically across your organization. So those are the visual tools that we give you. And we also give you APIs. So you can dig right in and expose those APIs to expose your build data through those APIs to tools you already use, like Splunk or Prometheus. Any build insights that you want to build, you can do it on your own dashboards, on our dashboards, really giving you speed when it comes down to how things are working and how they should be working. We've been at this for a long time. We've been doing this for about 20 years. We not only partner with engineering teams at big tech companies like Microsoft and Epic and AWS to integrate with their tools directly. That's maybe some of you actually might have seen us in Microsoft's Visual Studio, for example, or in the Unreal Engine editor. We also have some of the biggest brands in the business as customers, including those 3 that I just mentioned. They use us because we speed up their development as well. So this is just some of the logos here. We span almost every industry you can think of. One of our specialties, and most of our folks are in gaming. And that's because these are very, very big, complicated builds. And we speed them up significantly across the board. So nearly every major studio uses Incredibuild. If you've played a AAA title in the last decade and a half, you've likely played a game that we helped to get out the door faster. Not only do we accelerate those game engines like Unreal Engine, but we also speed up shader compilations when you so when you see us at GDC, which I'm hoping you're going to, let's talk more about what your team is doing and how we can help you directly and sort of right size our tools for what you need. One thing I haven't mentioned about speed and time is that we do this really fast. So I talked about it being non-disruptive. Most teams can get started in hours, not days. And most deployments take about a sprint. Discovery through deployment is pretty fast. Because we're non-disruptive and work with the tools you already use, like I said, Jenkins, TeamCity, GitHub, you name it, we work with it. And we are low impact. We don't require you to learn any new scripting languages or discover a new way to build things. You can build the way you're building today, and we work with that. We're going to take some questions in a second here. But I wanted to remind you that we are going to a GDC, like I said, booth S556. Beau and I will be there personally, as well as a number of other folks from our team. We will be more than happy to talk to you about what we're doing and how it's can help you and really understand what you're doing and see if we can't give you a hand getting your games out the door faster. So I'm going to take a look. I haven't been able to look at the Q&A yet, but I'll do that now.
We do have a question.
Yeah, there's one from Judy. Yeah.
Yeah, from Judy. So, for those who are not be able to see it exactly, it says she's asking about the smart compatibility layer. Re-engage my own tongue here. She wanted me to kind of elaborate a little bit for smaller companies that are looking to scale and grow. Kind of how does that help? And then also, is there an added cost? I mean, what it comes down to from an architecture's perspective on the software compatibility layer, at the end of the day, that gives you a lot of freedom and choice to be able to move and how you grow and at the rate that you grow. So instead of having to maintain big fleets of, on-demand instances that you constantly have to manage, now what it allows you as a smaller company to do is say, well, I only need these certain build machines. And instead of me trying to manage and run all these other fleets, I'm just going to utilize the cloud to be able to burst to. And then when you start thinking about costs on that, where we said Windows machines inevitably tend to cost more in all the cloud providers. You may see some of them depending on the size, $2, $4, and you go to a Linux one and it's now down into 60 to 80 cents. So that gives you a lot of flexibility from the customer's perspective. And as you need to grow and design your build farm, to just allow Incredibuild to give you that automation and orchestration control and use exactly what you need for those builds, and then scale and grow at time. And Duncan, I don't know if you want to add anything else about, as far as the cost metrics or anything along those matters, but let you add in some additional things.
Yeah, you nailed it. So essentially, our cloud services are your cloud instances, your spot instances that you're spinning up. So instead of paying for Windows instances, the SCL enables you to pay for Linux instances, which are about 40 to 70% cheaper. And so overall, what you're doing is just paying for the spots that you need when you need them, the least available price for that at the time. And a lot of folks utilize this just at crunch time. So for smaller orgs, it absolutely is a great way to stick your toe in the water. Learning how to use Incredibuild for distribution is quick and easy. And then learning how to add the cloud piece to it is sort of step two. Absolutely, SCL is what I recommend. It's literally just a switch in our control panel, and there's no reason not to turn it on, in my opinion. It saves you money. Hopefully that answers your question. Oh, good. It did. Thanks for joining. Any other questions? We've got plenty of time, so happy to field any more questions. Like I said, Beau and I are going to be on site there in San Francisco at GDC. We were there last year. It was a lot of fun. We have a lot of time there to have meetings with you folks, as well as we have on Tuesday night, I think, not an open house, but a reception dinner as well. So let us know if you'd like an invite to that.
Yeah, feel free if you are there to drop by the booth, and like I said, we'll be there. I'd love to talk tech and look at your architecture and what you're looking to try to solve, just from, same thing as from Judy's question. One thing I do want to just kind of leave as a reminder for everything that we talked about today. One of the key, most important points I want to make sure that's driven home from Incredibuild's perspective is we are agnostic to your architecture. And what that means is you can take advantage of the distribution, you can take advantage of the caching, you can utilize the Incredibuild cloud and the orchestration and all those type of powers that we can bring. And then when you need to modify your architecture because, to Judy's point, well, we're starting out small, but we need to change and we're going to adjust some of our tool sets. We're completely agnostic of that. So if you're started with Team City, say, as a CI server, and now you realize we're going to go to GitHub Actions, or we want to go to Jenkins, or whatever it is, it won't impact how you build with us. We will slide in there and integrate seamlessly and natively with it, and it just keeps you running. So we allow you to get that flexibility you need as a developer to modify your build as required.
Oh, sorry, one more question. Could you touch on how Incredibuild works in terms of helpers and initiators?
Sure. So again, that's just part of our grid component, right? We talked about the initiator, the coordinator, and the helpers. The way it works with the initiator and the helpers is the initiator is the machine that's doing the build. It talks to the coordinator hands out and says these helper machines are available. At that point, the initiator creates a direct peer-to-peer communication with that helper. And it just drives everything that it needs to and then keeps up track, what's going on with the build, what comes back. As Duncan talked about with the observability, we have build visualization tools that show you real time what's actually occurring, which machines are doing what tasks. And all that's done by a very lightweight agent, which is how Duncan talked about. If you want to get started very quickly, it's not something where we have to sit down and you have to plan 3 to 6 months for architecture and get this massive integration coming in. It's literally installing the agent on the machine, registering it to the coordinator, and then from that point, everything else automatically will handle based on those agent communications.
Yeah.
Judy, I hope that answered. If there's a follow-up question to that, or if I made that as clear as mud, please let me know. I'll be happy to expand a little bit more.
I want to follow up on your agnosticity. I guess I think I just made that word up, but the fact that we work with what you work with today extends to our cloud services as well. We talked about AWS and their vernacular, but we also work with Azure very closely, as well as GCP. So if you have a cloud service, chances are we work with them. That said, we also, like I said, we work on-prem, locally, shared, in the cloud. You can have any combination thereof. So a hybrid arrangement for anyone who's just starting out. Easy to get started with the laptops you have at home or at your office, just getting started with the resources you have and getting the distribution set up. Cool. Can't wait to see you guys at GDC. I think that wraps it up for Beau and I. Let me know if you need anything at all. Duncan Huffman at Incredibuild.com. I'm happy to chat with you anytime. And I'll see you at GDC.